Welcome to the Sundance Film Festival. This is my 5th year shooting, and this year my goal is to shoot the entire festival with just one lens. The Sony 20-70mm f4 lens with the Sony a7 IV. So let's get going and see what we can get. Just like that, Sundance is over once again, and so that means that I have to return this lens, unfortunately. But before I do that, I thought I'd share 3 insights that I learned after using this lens for a full week to shoot events. The first is that size and weight totally matter. So typically after shooting Sundance, I am just broken. My back, my shoulders, my wrist, everything aches and hurts. I usually have to take a few days off, go see my chiropractor immediately, but this time I actually feel totally fine. I don't have any aches or pain, and that's really because I use this camera combination and a flash on top. And while it is pretty heavy compared to something like an action camera or a cell phone, you know, this is still what I need to shoot events professionally. And for me, this is a really lightweight combination, thanks mainly to this lens. So prior to the 20-70 f4 lens, I was using the 24-70 f4 lens for a long time, but I recently traded it in for the 24-105 f4 lens, thinking that it was better to have a little bit more reach on the long end. And indeed, there were times when I wished that I had a little bit more reach with this lens, but that leads me to point number 2, which is if you shoot full-frame Sony mirrorless cameras, and you're using full-frame lenses, then you have 2 ways to increase the reach on the long end of those lenses. The first is Aps-C Mode, and I use it so often that I actually have one of my buttons dedicated to toggle it off and on all the time, because it makes me feel like I have a little bit of extra reach, especially if I'm using my prime lenses, but even when I'm using my zoom lenses. And so that's just a really nice way to get a little bit of extra zoom, although it does come at the cost of cropping into your image just a little bit. So that's one of the main reasons why I chose the a7 IV as opposed to the a7S III, because you want as many megapixels as you can in your camera. So the a7 IV has 33 megapixels, and you know, you could go a bit higher and get the a7R IV or the a7R V. Those cameras are more expensive, but they come with more megapixels. But for me personally, 33 megapixels is just fine for the way that I like to shoot. The second feature is clear image zoom, and so this is something that you can only do if you're shooting with JPEG. And for this particular client at Sundance, like, I only had to shoot JPEG, no raw photos, so I could take advantage of clear image zoom as well, and that gives you even more zoom on top of Aps-C Mode. So if you don't already use those functions on your Sony full-frame mirrorless camera, then I highly recommend trying them out because it really increases your reach. So because you can get a little bit more zoom out of your Sony full-frame mirrorless camera, I personally think it's more important to have a little bit more wiggle room on the wider end of your lens. And as someone who shot with a 24-70mm lens for a long time, having 4 extra millimeters on the wide end to back out to 20 millimeters is a really big deal. And I took heavy advantage of that at Sundance, especially during those times when I had to get big group photos where tons of people want to get in the same shot, or I'm shooting some ambient setup shots of an entire space. I loved having 20 millimeters on my wide end of my lens. My third insight is that the 20-70 f4 lens is not for everybody and not for every shooting situation. So for me personally, I've already made the switch over to f4 lenses whenever I'm shooting event photography, which actually makes up the bulk of my photography business. I'm out shooting events, and in that case, I am mostly going around with a speedlight flash. So I don't really need a fast aperture lens, which means I can save money and also save weight and not have to carry those super big lenses on my camera. However, prior to getting into event photography, I used to shoot concerts, I used to do a lot more low light photography, and in those situations, you would definitely need a different lens. Like, you can get away with an f4 lens, but in a lot of those situations, it's just not going to be enough. You're going to want something that's at least an f2.8 lens, or even down to an f1.8 lens. So besides my mid-range zoom lens, which again was a 24-70 f4, but right now is a 24-105 f4, I also have two prime lenses. I have a 20mm f1.8 and a 55mm f1.8. And I flip between those two lenses whenever I'm shooting in low light situations. And that's pretty much enough to get me through a lot of my shoots, especially if I take advantage of Aps-C mode and clear image zoom. So like many of you out there, I think that a lot of us are still dreaming of having something like a 20-70mm f2.8 lens or f1.8 lens, but I totally understand that doing that would mean that that lens would be significantly more expensive as well as a lot bigger and heavier. So considering the price and the size and the weight, I think that the 20-70mm f4 lens is really great for the certain types of photo shoots that I tend to do. So had I not just bought a 24-105 f4 lens, like literally just bought it, then I would probably be buying this lens right here. But for me personally, I'm gonna have to wait a little bit longer, maybe sell that other lens that I just bought, and if I can get enough money for it, then I'll put it towards this lens. So that's where I'm at personally. But for those of you who don't already have a mid-range zoom lens, then I would take a serious look at this 20-70 f4, because considering the size and the price and the image quality, I think that this could be a really great all-around lens for a lot of you out there. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.